Hello, I'm Donal Macaulay and welcome to medicsvoices.com, where we talk to the key opinion leaders in health and medicine around the world. Today we're in Australia and I'm talking to Karen Flegg. Karen's the incoming president of the World Organization of Family Doctors. Now, Karen, you've had a very interesting international trajectory. I see you've worked in New Zealand, you've also worked in Iran. Tell me your journey to where you are at the present.
I worked in New Zealand 25 years ago. I was the Chief Executive Officer of the Royal New Zealand College of GPs, actually one of the WONCA member organisations. But I did do some clinical practice at the same time, so I didn't quite give that up then. And the Iranian trip that you refer to was actually a mission with Médecins Sans Frontières France in 2005. Where I enrolled with MSF, and they told me I'd be very difficult to place because of, I don't know, age and preferences. And I really thought I'd get sent to Indonesia because the tsunami had just hit Banda Aceh, and 2 days later I'm being offered a place in Iran and had an enjoyable time doing an MSF mission.
Well, that experience both in New Zealand and in Iran really equips you very well for your incoming presidency. So the WONCA conference is coming to Australia. Tell me what your hopes are for the conference.
I'm hoping that this WONCA conference will be like all the WONCA World Conferences I've been to. Great places to see old friends, meet new friends, exchange ideas with people from your own country in my case, but also all those international people who are coming here to tell us about family medicine in their countries. And I've made some great friends in WONCA over the years. My first WONCA conference was actually held somewhere fairly close to you, Donald, in Dublin, with the council meetings in Killarney before that. And there are people that I met at that conference who I'm still friends with today.
Yeah, that WONCA conference in Dublin was a really remarkable event. I greatly enjoyed it. I found it inspiring, and indeed Michael Boland, who was the president of WONCA, really ran a terrific conference. But WONCA really is an inspiring organization. It's got many challenges though, because you're trying to bring primary care from very many different backgrounds. How does that work?
Yeah, it is challenging at times. And, you know, WONCA is a member-based organisation, and the members are the member organisations in the countries. So the colleges and academies of general practice or family medicine. So it's really bringing the people together to work on problems on a global level. And I guess some of those problems are things that maybe in your health system or my health system, we may be able to help others with, and at times others can help us with them. So there's a knowledge exchange and a richness really based on having people from such a wide variety of countries. You know, WONCA at this point, I think, has something like 133 member organisations, and that represents 111 countries in the world, which is quite a large number, about 500,000 family doctors and perhaps 90% of the world's population.
Now, one of the things you talked about with WONCA is the exchange of ideas and communication. And of course, you've had a role within WONCA in the communications section because you've been editor of WONCA News. Tell me about that.
I was the WONCA editor for 10 years, and for much of that time, I also managed the website. So again, for me, that presented an opportunity to meet so many colleagues and find out about what family medicine was like in their countries by doing interviews with them for a featured doctor column, by having them write articles, which I had to read, of course. So I learned an awful lot about what happens and what people's challenges are through doing that role. I also learned how to look at the back end of a website, which was a skill I never really expected to get or have a go at. And I did have the advantage of spending much of that time working with Garth Manning as CEO. Before him, a little bit of the time with Alfred Lowe, but much of it with Garth, and with several different presidents in Rich Roberts, Michael Kidd and Amanda Howe. So it was a very rewarding 10 years, but at times it was quite a lot of work.
You've name-checked some fairly significant figures in the world of WONCA, I have to say, and really very different and very interesting people, each bringing their own angle to WONCA. But let me ask you about something else, because when we talk about family medicine, we do have a problem at the moment in terms of getting our message across. Now, as an editor, how do you feel we're doing about communicating the role of family medicine in Australia, for example, where there are great difficulties, but also around the world?
Yes, it's an interesting question. I mean, in Australia, I think many of us GPs are concerned about the sustainability of general practice, and I'm really talking about financial sustainability, workforce sustainability, and of course, workforce is a fairly big international issue for all of us. So there are issues locally. I do have colleagues who talk about sustainability from a much broader perspective, including environmental issues, which I'm quite passionate about and interested in, but also these other issues of workforce burnout, which was fairly common as well in COVID in multiple places and multiple systems. But yes, we are struggling with the system.
Now you've worked, I note that you've worked both in rural practice and in urban practice, but you have an interest also in the Indigenous community. And this is an issue that's really coming up really in the headlines in Australia at the moment. That seems very difficult. Where are things going with the referendum, for example?
Yes, there is a referendum coming up in, I think it must be 2.5 weeks, on whether the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people will have a voice or in our parliament. And there's a lot of debate internally. There's people on both sides. But yes, I have worked a lot in the last half a dozen years in Central Australia, in remote Aboriginal communities, or in Alice Springs, which is that dot fairly well in the centre of the country. Conditions are not good, and workforce of GPs themselves is rather low. The system tends to be a nurse-led system because they are the ones in those communities all the time, along with Aboriginal health workers, and doctors tend to visit. So we have a workforce problem in our urban areas, but we have a fairly big one in our remote areas as well. So I guess we're hoping whatever the outcome is in the referendum, that we will get some change, particularly in places like remote Australia, where a lot of change is needed to bring health outcomes and health equity in line with other places in the country.
Now, when you discussed that, you talked about workforce and the sustainability earlier of general practice, and you've worked both in single-handed practice and in group practice. What model do you think we're looking at for the future of general practice?
I think we're looking at group practice. Yes, I worked in a one-doctor town as the only doctor when I was still in the training program for general practice. It's fairly well unheard of today. But yes, practices are joining together. In Australia, we have private practices, not government clinics, except if you go remote, and they are becoming often corporatized. So they're not just, it's not just one group practice, it belongs to a group of group practices. But I think, the advantages of a group practice are you have got colleagues on site. It's not as isolated. You've got people to talk to, people to show the most difficult rash to, and there's always difficult rashes. So, I think the future for us is group practice. It'll be interesting to see how long it takes before we all become government employees in this country, which of course many countries, the GPs are.
Now, as we've talked earlier about administration and about WONCA, people might get the impression that you're a very serious administrator and backroom worker, but I know you've another string to your bow, and I'd like to ask a little bit about that because you have an interest in fine art. Tell us about that.
Yes, I should just move my head. I think there's one on the wall behind me. Yes, well, doing art wasn't a terribly approved of thing in high school, and when I was in my 30s, I was doing some forensic work in a sexual assault service. So I went to art school for 2 years and survived doing after hours, highly paid forensic work. And I enjoy life drawing, and I quite like doing abstract paintings as well. Two extremes of reality.
So you've gone now from single-handed practice, group practice, CEO in New Zealand, president of WONCA, but also this vocation in art. So when you're talking to young doctors, and this is the sort of final message for our listeners and readers, what do you say to them? Is it follow your vocation or get a job?
Oh dear, that's a difficult one, isn't it? And I do talk to young doctors. I think everybody really has to do what they have a passion for and find the thing with the passion in medicine. But everybody also needs other interests and other outlets. And I'm not sure that art mixes that well with medicine, though people will disagree because we've certainly taught art as therapy in our medical school. I find it a little difficult to do that, but it's good to have passions inside and outside medicine.
Karen, thank you very much for chatting to us this morning and your evening. Following your passion, that's a lovely message. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah. Thanks, Donald. Thank you.